Hello friend, welcome back to my channel. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. It's Tim here, and in this video, I'm going to guide you through the steps to create this summer island inspired landscape painting. I live here in the Midwest, and I feel like we get 2 months of summer, 4 months of fall, and the rest is winter, so I'm definitely enjoying the sunshine, which is actually what inspired this painting. This painting would be great for any skill level, and it's very beginner friendly as well. We're going to be covering a lot of fun painting techniques and topics throughout, so I'm excited to begin. If you recreate this painting and are on Instagram, I would absolutely love to see it, so please tag me at Timstar Studio. Upcoming here are the hex codes for the palette of colors we're going to be using on Procreate. Also, I accidentally forgot the tree color in the original palette, so I've added it here at the beginning so that way you'll have it when we reach that point, and it's that tree trunk color I have at the bottom. And I also wanted to add for the setup of the palette, I have the hex codes listed here, how you'll end up seeing it in the mini palette. When you're painting though, to insert the colors, you'll use the expanded view and then input the hex codes across, inserting each hex code number where those 6 zeros are right there in the value section of the color wheel on Procreate. And then once you have the color, you'll go ahead and tap each of the empty boxes to fill it up. No spaces in between each color. So when you get every color added, you should have a palette that looks like this. And then when you go to minimize it, it should end up looking like our mini palette here. I had a couple of questions on another video about hex codes, so I hope that was helpful for you. And I think I want to do a video here in the future expanding on this just a little bit more. Definitely let me know below if that's something you'd like to see. Here are the brushes we're going to be using in this video. All of them are located in the Procreate default library except for the damp brush, which should still be available on Pocket Procreate for the iPhone, but I do have a video up on my channel on how to recreate a version of this brush for the iPad from scratch. So if you need it, definitely go check it out. It's a great brush to paint with, probably one of my absolute favorites. The first step of our tutorial will be to take a screenshot of this trace outline layer. You're then going to insert the screenshot into a blank square-sized canvas on Procreate. You will then turn the opacity of the screenshot down and then fit it to the screen, which should be the size of the canvas. Then you will add a separate new layer over the top. And then you're going to trace over the top of it to create an outline. And I do recommend using the technical pen to do it. It's definitely the easiest thing to use to trace with. That way you have a guide to follow along with for your painting. Please feel free to take any breaks or pause any section along the way. And when you're ready, let's begin. All right, so we're going to turn our trace layer down. Let's turn it down to like 10%. We're going to add a new layer and put that layer underneath of our trace layer. We're going to open our colors up here. Let's use the third color in the first row, and let's fill in the entire canvas with this color. Let's add a new layer. Let's switch over to using the paintbrush now with the soft airbrush. Let's just do full size with full opacity. Let's use the fourth color in the first row, this shade of light blue, and we're going to paint a stripe of color across the middle of the painting and hold it down, and we're going to center that here, and then I'm going to put another stripe of color on top of it just like this. Hold that down, straighten it out, and then center it just like that. Now let's use Gaussian blur, and let's blur that layer to around 49%. Next, we're going to be using soft light to create some depth of color around the top edge here, which is one of my absolute favorite tips to create new colors in your painting without actually having to have them in your color palette to start off with. Definitely one of my favorite ways to add depth and shadow to your paintings. Let's add a new layer and put that layer into soft light. Let's use the second color in the first row, the color black, and let's paint a stripe of color across the top just like this. Holding it down, making it straight, and then centering it. Now let's use Gaussian blur and blur this layer to around 33%. Let's zoom up here. Let's add a new layer. We're going to switch over to using the paintbrush now, and we're going to use the damp brush. Let's do like 9% brush size with full opacity. Let's grab the first color in the first row, the color white. And now let's paint the clouds. In this upcoming section, we're going to be using two different variations of the same paint stroke, which is a looser circular scrubbing paint stroke and then a tighter scrubbing paint stroke, which is the same, just a little more compact with shorter, closer together loops. This technique is one of my absolute favorites to make clouds with. Now along our cloud outline here, using circular scrubbing paint motions, we're going to fill in our clouds. Just like this. Going all the way to the right side, and then starting here right around the middle, we're going to repeat that again here, just like that. We're going to put a little bit of cloud here right in the center, just like that. Now starting here on the left-hand side, we're going to work our way over here, right behind where the tree is going to sit later on, stopping right about there, just adding just a little bit of cloud color right on the corner. Now we're going to zoom up here. We're going to switch over to using the blending tool now with the damp brush as well. Let's use like 9% brush size. Let's do like 35% or so in opacity. Now using the same circular scrubbing paint strokes, going to lightly blend and buff out our new clouds, kind of creating a nice light hazy look for them, just like that. Then we're going to work our way across again, just slightly underneath of them, and then working our way onto these bottom clouds here, finishing out the very bottom edge, just like that, kind of smoking it out just a little bit. Now let's move over to the clouds here in the middle. We're going to lightly buff and blend these out, working our way down and across, just like that. And then we're going to finish out by blending out this last cloud right here. Working our way down, repeating those same steps, and then finishing off on the bottom edge here, just like that. Now I'm going to turn our trace outline off for just a moment, just like that. Let's turn the opacity of our brush down just a little bit. Let's go to like 27% or so, and then let's up our brush size to like 12%. And then very lightly, with what we just blended, we're going to lightly buff and blend that out just a little bit more, creating a really hazy, puffy look to our clouds. Just kind of blending them in with our background here. Blending as little or as much as you'd like. Then I'm going to do the middle cloud here. Just like that. And then working our way to the bottom. And then we're going to finish up that edge on this left-hand side on this cloud here. Continuing to blend this out as little or as much as you'd like. This little extra bit of blending too will help smooth out any of the stamp pattern that's been left behind from the brush. It just creates a really nice, cleaner look up close. Let's add another new layer. We're going to add just one more layer of cloud, so let's turn on our trace outline layer again. Now let's zoom up here. Let's switch back over to the paintbrush now. Now we're going to add some definition to our clouds. Still using the damp brush. Let's do like 4% brush size, full opacity. Now along this left side edge again, we're going to use the same paint strokes, but just a little bit tighter and smaller than what we just did. Only adding this new highlight color along the top edge of the cloud. And we're just going to follow this line here, finishing out on that right side edge. Moving that over so we can see it a little bit better. Just like that. We're going to go right here in the middle and add just a little bit of cloud cover just like that. And this brush is set to trail off a little bit too, so to get some stronger color, you just have to lift the brush back up just like this. So if I let it go on, it'll just kind of disappear. But if I keep lifting my brush, it'll show up. So let's get rid of that here. And then just finish out that edge. There we go. Now let's switch back over to the blending tool with the damp brush. Let's do like 7% brush size. Let's do 31% opacity. Now right underneath of the top edge, and I'm going to turn our trace outline off again so it's easier to see. And we're going to be blending out our clouds again, but this time we're going to avoid blending that top edge. Instead, we're going to be blending the middle and the bottom edge, leaving the top edge sharp. Just like this. Using loose, scrubbing paint strokes, avoiding that top edge. We're going to lightly blend it out. And that's just to preserve that edge too, because I don't want to completely get rid of it now. These are like our detail clouds. And then I'm going to repeat that over here. And it kind of helps to start the paint stroke kind of off to the side. That way it kind of creates a nice smooth gradient for you. And then just lightly blending that in. Let's go here to the middle. Still just avoiding that top. I kind of want to leave just the edge. Just like that. And then finishing that off on the left-hand side cloud. Kind of just blending the middle into the top, but not blending away that top edge. And then just lightly scrubbing that right side edge out. And then blending out the bottom. Let's zoom back just a little bit. I'm going to turn this layer down just a little bit. And let's turn the opacity of this layer down to around 76%. Now let's merge all of these layers back together. And now we're going to add just a little bit of color texture to our sky. Let's add a new layer and put this layer into soft light. Let's grab the second color in the first row, the color black. Now using the damp brush again with the paintbrush, let's do like 8% brush size, full opacity. And we're just gonna lightly squiggle some color across the screen here, just like this. Let's add another squiggle here, kind of blending that middle area in with the top. Now let's switch over to the blending tool again with the damp brush. Let's do like 10% brush size, 51% or so in opacity. And blending across using circular scrubbing paint strokes that are a little bit looser, we're gonna just lightly buff out this new texture. Just kind of marrying all of our colors and textures together. And this new texture really helps to just blend the cloud texture in with the background. That way it doesn't all look too smooth, helping to really unify everything together. Just like that. Then we're going to turn this layer down. Let's turn it down to like 41%. And when you're happy with your sky and clouds, now it's time to paint the background island. Let's add a new layer. Now let's turn our trace layer back on. Let's switch over to the water pen now with the paintbrush. Let's do like 12% brush size, full opacity. Using the sixth color in the first row, the shade of sage green. Let's outline the top edge of the mountain here, just like that. Working our way across. And then using color drop, let's fill in this space completely. Now let's add a new layer. Let's grab the fifth color in the first row, this darker shade of sage green. And now let's outline this bottom edge here, right underneath the top. Working our way across. Now using color drop, let's fill this space in. Let's merge these two layers down together. I'm going to turn our trace layer off for just a moment. So this is one of the rare times that I'm actually going to leave the line that it creates. So let me grab the black. This little line it creates in between them because it's going to later add to our effect. which brings us to painting the ocean. So let's go ahead and add a new layer and turn the trace layer back on. Now let's use the first color in the second row, and across this middle line, let's go ahead and just paint a straight line across. Don't need to hold it down because I want to keep this solid, and then I'm going to double outline it again. And then using color drop, let's go ahead and fill the rest of this shape in, just like that. And then here I am actually going to fill in that little line here that it creates. Let's add a new layer. Now using the second color in the second row, this shade of aqua, let's paint another line across the middle here of the water. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill the rest of this shape in. And then using Gaussian blur, let's blur that layer to around 19% or so. Let's go ahead and merge all of these layers back down. And now it's time to paint the grass. Let's add a new layer. Let's use the third color in the second row. Starting about right here, following the curve of the land, let's go ahead and follow this line across, just like that. Then using color drop, let's go ahead and fill this shape in, just like that. Then I'm just filling in any areas that it didn't quite cover. Let's add another new layer. Now using the first color in the third row, this dark shade of green. Now starting about right here, we're going to paint a straight line across. And then using color drop, let's fill the bottom of the shape in, just like that. Then we're going to use Gaussian blur and blur that color to around 40% or so. Let's merge those two layers back together. Let's add another new layer. And now let's switch over to the paintbrush now with the damp brush. Let's do like 5% brush size, about 35% or so in opacity. In this upcoming section, I'm going to be using what I like to call the sad face highlight, which is just a silly name for a sideways back and forth paint stroke that's downturned at the end, kind of creating what looks like a sad face in shape. And this is one of my absolute favorite ways to paint grass. Now using the fourth color in the second row, this light shade of green, starting here around this top edge here. Using our sad face highlight, we're going to go ahead and add some highlight across, working our way down, giving our grass some nice texture here. And I am kind of varying how hard I press on the pencil to get areas of heavier and lighter color coverage, still allowing the color underneath to still show through a little bit. Working our way down to the bottom. When you reach the bottom, let's go ahead and turn this layer down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 71%. Let's add another new layer. And then still using the damp brush, let's change our brush size now to around 3%. And then about 33% in opacity. And we're just going to repeat those steps with the smaller brush, adding just a little bit more highlight to our grass. Just like that. It's one of my absolute favorite techniques of painting grass. It creates some really beautiful textures within this color. Let's go ahead and turn our trace outline layer off for just a moment. Let's merge these grass layers back together. But be careful not to merge this layer onto the main background layer quite yet. This will leave us with 3 layers, the trace layer, the grass layer, and then the background. And now we're going to add just a little bit more highlight color to our grass. Let's go ahead and add another new layer. Now using the 5th color in the second row, this lightest shade of green, starting up here at the top again, we're going to add just a little bit more highlight here. Just around this top area. And I am pressing really lightly on the pencil just to keep the color light here. Working our way down and kind of stopping right around here. or so. We're going to go ahead and turn this layer down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to around 88%. Let's go ahead and merge this layer down onto our grass layer. Then I'm going to turn our trace layer back on. And now let's paint the path. Let's add a new layer. And now we're going to use the damp brush. Let's do about 3% brush size with about 53% opacity. Now let's use the fourth color in the third row, this tannish shade of gray. It's a nice shade of grayish. Now starting on this left-hand side where the pathway is, using back and forth scrubbing paint strokes, let's lightly fill in our pathway, following our trace outline layer here. And once we hit the right-hand side, I'm going to zoom up here, and I'm actually going to make my brush size just a little bit smaller. Let's go to like 2%. And then starting on this far left corner and working my way back over to the right, following that curve, going to finish adding our pathway here, just like that. All right, let's go ahead and add a new layer. Let's switch over to the paintbrush now with the water pen. Let's do like 7% brush size with full opacity. I realized I forgot my trunk color in my palette, so let me go ahead and fix that. You guys will already have it though, which is the lonely shade of brown in the bottom right-hand corner. And before we paint the tree, I just wanted to thank you so much, friend, for watching, and I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps my channel out. Thank you so much for supporting my art, and I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. Now using this last lonely shade of brown here after we've got that fixed, at the bottom, which will be the sixth color in the fifth row, using the water pen, let's do like 8% brush size with full opacity. Starting here up at the top, we're just going to paint a straight line down, following that curve. And let's start on the right-hand side, working our way back over, connecting right here as a Y. And then we're going to work our way back down, making that just a little bit thicker, filling that out here. Now let's use hue and saturation. We're going to turn the brightness of it down. Let's turn it down to like 49%, up the saturation of it to about 54%. Now, still using that same shade of brown, let's shrink our brush size to like 4%. And we're going to paint a little highlight on the top of that, just filling that out. And then on the top of that, it's very subtle, but it makes a really pretty highlight on that. So take the trace outline layer away, you can kind of see that very light, very vague highlight on the top, but it creates some really nice dimension for the tree trunk. Now let me turn that back on, and then I'm going to paint one little offshoot here for that side branch. Let's go ahead and add a new layer, and we're going to put that layer underneath of the tree trunk. Still using the water pen with the first color in the third row, the stark shade of green. Let's use like 30% brush size with full opacity. We're going to paint a little bit of color on that branch here, just like that. Let's put another one here. Gonna put another puff of color there. Let's put one here, and then right here. Now using the third color in the second row, we're gonna paint a little bit of highlight green on top of this, just like that. And then on that one, right here, that one, and then finishing it off with that last shape right there. Now let's switch over to the blending tool now, and we're going to use the damp brush. Let's do like 5% brush size with around 54% opacity. Now using the same circular scrubbing paint strokes that we used to blend out the clouds with, we're going to lightly blend and buff out our tree color. And here blending my way across and then down across each one, lightly puffing out the edges a little bit, creating a nice little transparency between the background colors and the tree. Finishing out, blending that out the same way here. Preserving some of those spaces in between. And then finishing off, blending out that edge. It's kind of adding any little detail areas that you might want. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this layer, which will make the green just a little bit more opaque. Let's turn it down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 78%. Let's merge those two layers together. Let's go ahead and add a new layer, and we're going to put that layer over the tree trunk layer so it'll be on the top underneath of the trace outline layer. Still using the paintbrush with the water pen, let's grab the third color in the second row again, and we're going to paint just a little bit of highlight green right over that spot. Let's put some right there. Put a little bit right there as well. Now using the blending tool still with the damp brush, let's just lightly blend that out. Repeating this across all of our new highlight. Once that's blended out, we're going to go ahead and paint the lighthouse. Once you're happy with your tree, we're going to go ahead and turn our trace outline layer back on. Let's zoom up here. Switching over to the paintbrush now, still with the water pen. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. Let's do like 3% brush size with full opacity. Now using the 6th color in the first row again, let's go ahead and outline our lighthouse here, just like that. Then finishing off at the bottom, and then let's fill it in. Let's turn our trace outline layer off. Now to make this just a little bit lighter and to blend in with our background a little bit better, let's turn the opacity of this layer way down. Let's go to like 53% or so. Then I'm going to merge all of our layers down. Let's turn our trace outline layer back on. And now let's paint the bushes. Let's add a new layer. Still using the water pen here. Let's use like 10% brush size, full opacity. Let's grab the first color in the third row. And we're going to start here on this left side and fill this in the same way we used to paint the clouds with, using circular scrubbing paint strokes. Finishing off on the right side. Now let's fill this next one in. And then fill this space in right here. Let's grab the second color in the third row, this lighter shade of green. And then let's paint just a little bit of this highlight green here on the top of this back bush. Let's put a little bit right here, following that edge. Then a little bit right there. Let's move on to this left-hand side cluster of bushes. So let's use the first color in the third row and go ahead and, using that same painting technique, fill in this bush here and then filling in that bush right here in the front. Let's grab the second color in the third row and add a little bit of highlight color to the top of it, just like that. Let's add just a little bit of highlight to this bottom one here. Now this bottom one, let's grab the first color in the third row again and fill that in here. And then fill this one in. Still using that second color in the third row next to it, let's go ahead and add a little bit of highlight on top of it. And then on top of this one. And now we're going to add just a little bit more color on the top of these bushes. Now on these back ones here, let's shrink our brush size to around 5%, still full opacity. And let's grab the third color in the third row. And using even smaller paint strokes now, let's add just another layer of highlight on top using squiggle motions. Let's add a little bit on this one, and then just a little bit on this one. Let's go ahead and add some of this highlight color on this left side bush here, edge. Let's add some on this one. And then I'm going to add just a little bit on this bottom one here, just like that. And when you're happy with your bushes, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the trace outline layer. That way it's easier to blend. And now we're going to blend out each bush. Let's go ahead and switch over to the blending tool now with the damp brush. About 3% brush size with around 73% opacity. Now using the same circular scrubbing paint strokes that we used to blend out the clouds with, we're going to go ahead and blend out our bushes. And around the edges here, I'm going to kind of puff out the top just a little bit, just to kind of create the illusion of some leaves. Blending our way across the top edge first, and then working our way down and then back across. Just like that. And I do find it easier to work from left to right for whatever reason to blend these out with. Just blending out across in rows and then working our way downwards. Let's move down here to this next one. And I'm leaving just a little bit of that dark edge in between that light highlight color and the bottom of that last bush here, just to create a little bit of a difference. But we're blending them out using the same painting method. And then finishing up down here at the bottom. I'm going to go back up here and kind of fluff out the top just a little bit. Just like that. Let's finish off this bottom one here. Let's go ahead and repeat that on these bushes over here. Kind of puffing out the top edge just a little bit. Working our way down, and then working our way across and back over again. Repeating these same steps to blend out these bushes. And on this side, I am still working from left to right, only I'm moving downwards. Just kind of smoothing out any areas that need to be better blended together. And just kind of finishing that off down there. I'm going to kind of flatten this edge out just a little bit so it blends with the grass. Let's finish that over here. Kind of finishing out, blending out this bottom bush here. Then flattening out that bottom edge. Now let's move down here. Let's move to these bottom ones, and I'm going to finish out blending these out. And working our way back across, just like the other ones. Kind of flattening that bottom edge out so it blends a little better, and then working our way onto this last one. And now that we've got this all blended out, we're going to go back in and smooth and fine tune our blending just a little bit more. Now let's go to like 4% brush size with around 29–30% opacity. And we're going to lightly blend these out again, but we're going to be really careful not to get rid of all of the texture. We just kind of want to smooth them out just a little bit more. Still using those same circular scrubbing paint strokes. Just kind of marrying everything together. Just like that. And blending this bottom one out. Let's go ahead and repeat these steps on the ones up here, just kind of lightly buffing and blending these out. I'm not getting rid of the texture, just kind of marrying everything together. Then blending out these bottoms here, kind of just smoothing those over. Then smoothing that one over. Let's go ahead and repeat this on these ones on the left-hand side. Sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around in a different way than I did the first time, but that's just how we do here. I'm so weird, if you can't already tell. And we're going to repeat this on this last bush here. It's pretty late when I recorded this, so it's hard telling what's going to come out of my mouth. Let's finish off this bottom edge here, and then just kind of flatten that off a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and create a copy of this bush layer now. So there's two of them, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this new layer down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 69%. Which brings us to painting the flowers. Making sure our trace outline layer is off, let's go ahead and create a copy canvas layer and paste. Let's add a new layer. And we're going to add some flowers. So let's go ahead and switch over to the damp brush now with the paintbrush. Let's use like 2% brush size. Let's do full opacity. We're going to paint some dots across this bottom bush here. And I wanted to show you real quickly, that way you can see it. I'm kind of just going like this, kind of randomizing across this top edge and then moving my way down. Let me get rid of that here real quick. I just kind of wanted to show you the pattern. We're going to repeat this across this bottom bush, making sure nothing is too defined, and then repeating this down, moving our way down and across again, just like that. We're going to work our way over here. Let's put some of these flowers on the top of this one using the same paint strokes. Working our way down and across. And let's move our way down just a little bit here. Then let's do a final layer, kind of moving our way down just a little bit, making sure it's really random. Let's put some down here too. Let's be crazy today. But just today, let's move. Let's add some down here. Putting a couple across, and then working our way down and across again. And I do find it helps to have the stylus pointed straight up and down at the screen tapping rather than having it at a tilt, because I feel like at a tilt, it'll kind of create that motion, rather than if you're straight up and down, it creates more of a true dot, just like that. I think I want to add some yellow flowers as well. So let's go ahead and use the 6th color in the 3rd row, shade of yellow. And then using those same paint strokes, we're going to go ahead and add some yellow flowers to this bush up here. Adding as little or as many as you'd like. Let's work our way across again, just adding another row. And if you don't trust yourself, you can definitely put these on a different layer. I just put them on the same layer to make it a little bit easier. Yeah, actually let's put some over here too. Put a couple across this bush. Then working our way down again. Just kind of finishing that off here. Making sure to be really random about it is the key to making it look more natural. Let's zoom back here. Now that we have our flowers painted, it's time to add shadows and highlights. Let's add a new layer and put that layer into soft light. Let's switch over to using the paintbrush now with the soft airbrush. Let's use full size, full opacity. Let's grab the second color in the first row, the shade of black, and along the left side edge, starting at the top, we're going to paint a straight line down, just like that. And then we're going to paint a straight line across the bottom, just like that. And we're going to actually curve this edge here. Now let's use Gaussian blur and blur that to around 33% or so. Let's turn this layer way down. Let's turn it down to like 36%. Let's add a new layer and put that layer into overlay. Let's grab the first color in the first row, the color white. And across the top here, starting on the left-hand side, we're going to paint a stripe of color just like that. And then we're going to paint this stripe down the right side. And then we're going to round this corner off, just like we did with the last one. And then using Gaussian blur, we're going to blur that to around 58%. We're going to turn the opacity of it way down. Let's turn it down to like 30%. Let's add another new layer and put it into overlay. Still using the soft airbrush with the paintbrush, let's paint a circle in the center of the painting here, just like this. Now let's use Gaussian blur and blur that layer to around 87% or so. Let's add another new layer and put that layer into soft light again. Let's use the damp brush now with the paintbrush, around 5% brush size with around 52% opacity. Now let's use the second color in the first row again, and using back and forth scrubbing paint strokes, I'm going to start adding just a little bit more texture to the water here, just across the back. Now starting here on this left-hand side, I'm going to bring this down into the water area just a little bit, just like that, and then across. Kind of leaving a space right around here, just like that. Let's go ahead and move down. I'm going to add just a little bit of highlight to the bottoms of these bushes down here, right over top of our flowers. Let's add some to that one. Let's go ahead and add some to this bottom right-hand corner and then to the bush above it. Let's add just a little bit to this one too. Let's go ahead and put a little bit of shadow color on the bottom of this tree here. And then to the bottom of this one. And then finally, we're going to add just a little bit of this low light color across the bottom of the canvas. Just kind of using back and forth scrubbing paint strokes just to kind of randomly add some color here. Focusing the color here just along the bottom just to kind of add some shadow and some more texture to the grass. Now let's switch over to the blending tool now with the damp brush. Let's do like 10% brush size, 32% or so opacity. And then using back and forth scrubbing paint strokes, let's lightly blend and buff this new color out. And buff the color in the water and then kind of over the background area, which will really help marry all of our textures together. I'm going to buff the tree out here. And then the top part of it. I'm going to buff that edge out. Now I'm going to turn this layer down. Let's turn this layer's opacity way down. Let's turn it down to like 39%. Let's go ahead and add another new layer and put that layer into overlay. Let's use first color in the first row, the color white. Let's use about 3% brush size with around 39% or so opacity. And then using our sad face highlight again, going over top of the pathway, we're going to just add a little bit more highlight to the grass and over top of the path, working our way down, painting just a little bit, put a little bit over here. And we kind of want to work our way into the new shadow area here. Let's add just a little bit right here across from the other side of the path. Just like that. I'm going to add just a little bit here on the pathway, creating a nice highlight there. And let's put another highlight directly on the path up here. Let's go ahead and switch over to the blending tool now with the damp brush, and let's lightly buff this new color out, just going back and forth over top of it. Then I'm going to turn this layer down. Actually, let's go ahead and put, I forgot about this. Let's put just a little bit of this color with the paintbrush on top of this top tree here. Let's put a little bit on top here, and a little bit right there, and a little right there. Then using the blending tool again on that same layer, let's just lightly blend that out. That was my bad, sorry guys. Once that's blended out, let's go ahead and turn this layer's opacity down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 81%. And now we're going to add some grass texture. Here in this upcoming section, we're going to be using short, left, right, and upwards flicks to create individual grass strokes. We will be using the water pen, and you'll want to vary and kind of randomize the pattern going across, working our way from left to right, which will really create a nice natural looking grass pattern, which will end up looking like this over top of the painting here in just a second. Let's go ahead and let's make sure our trace outline layer is turned off. Now let's create a copy canvas layer and paste. Now starting back here, we're going to paint some grass. So let's switch over to the blending tool now with the water pen. Let's do like 3% brush size with full opacity. And let's go ahead and using back and forth, up and down paint strokes that are short and random. Let's go ahead and add some grass texture, working our way across. And we're going to start here in the back, and we are blending the darker color into the lighter color, and then the lighter color into the darker color. This will create some really nice texture for our painting. And then working our way down and across again, creating another row. And we're going to repeat that over the entire grass area. Over the pathway, I'm going to put a couple of paint strokes right up against the pathway just to kind of indicate the grass is growing and maybe a little overgrown onto it. Kind of creates a nice beachy feel. Really feels like we're walking down this pathway to the beach. I am so over winter. I don't know about you guys, but I am so ready for warmer weather. I hate the cold. And then we're just going to repeat this going down. Then finishing that off down here, I'm going to put a couple of grass strokes over top of the pathway here. It makes it look a lot more realistic. Make sure to vary your paint stroke height and direction too. You don't want all of your grass going one way. helps when you've got a variety. Variety is the spice of life, don't you agree? Just continuing to finish up our grass, and when you're happy, it's time to paint the finishing details. Once you're finished with your grass, let's create another copy of this layer. I'm going to zoom up here. Let's go ahead and add another new layer and put that layer into overlay. And we're going to go ahead and use the paintbrush with the damp brush. About 3% brush size, 45% opacity, using the first color in the first row again. And then using back and forth, kind of our sad face highlight. Paint strokes again, we're just going to add just a little bit of highlight to the water. Just kind of brightening that up. And then I'm going to bring that onto the grass again. Creating some really nice special highlights here. I'm going to bring some down here. Being really careful, we don't want to overwhelm our painting. And then I'll put a little bit down here. Let's go ahead and switch over to the blending tool now with the damp brush. Let's use like 10% brush size, 32% opacity, and then using back and forth paint strokes, let's just lightly blend and buff this new texture out. Just kind of softening that up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and turn this layer down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 94% or so. And we're done. Now let's sign our painting. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and the tutorial. I hope that you had fun on this painting adventure. I've got a lot of fun things in the works to come, so I'm super excited for the future. This one took me a little bit longer than normal to get done, so I apologize for that. The summer has been really busy already, and it may be a couple of weeks until my next one. If you have any questions, definitely let me know below. And if you want to continue painting, I have a ton of other tutorials now up on my channel, so definitely go check those out. And if you like this video and want to see more content like this, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And until next time, friend, happy painting.